Hello, this is Vlad. I'm glad to share with you a new original story on my channel that never happens. Are you really going there? Valentin asked skeptically. What's the problem? He wasn't a stranger to me. I want to say goodbye, Diana answered quickly. Uh-huh, her husband replied in a fake thoughtful tone. Let's think about this. This so-called not a stranger left you alone with a baby and disappeared for 7 years. You know that's not true, Diana protested. His words were a rough exaggeration. She and Petya had dated for a while but eventually broke up because they weren't compatible. It was a mutual decision. Only later did Diana find out she was pregnant. She chose not to complicate things and never told him about it. Go on, defend him then, Valentin said mockingly. Oh, come on, Diana muttered. Are you seriously jealous of someone I haven't seen in 7 years and who's dead now? Jealous?
Please, he scoffed.
I just don't understand. Why do you need to go to his funeral? Diana sighed heavily. The conversation was going in circles. How could she explain to her husband something he clearly didn't want to understand? She already told him she just wanted to say goodbye. She wasn't canceling any of their plans or doing anything dramatic. But still, Valentin was unhappy. Then again, when was he ever happy? Their marriage had gone off track from the very start. When they first met, Diana had just gone through a painful breakup, though she barely admitted to herself how much it hurt. That was also when she had learned she was pregnant. Valentin showed up out of nowhere, charming and attentive. He said he fell in love at first sight and didn't care that she was carrying another man's child. He promised he'd raise the baby as his own. He promised a lot of things. But reality was different. Diana hadn't married him out of great love, more out of desperation, afraid of raising her child alone. From the very beginning, Valentin never warmed up to the newborn. Maybe he just couldn't accept that he wasn't the real father. His love for Diana could have made up for that if it had truly existed. But soon she realized he never had those deep feelings. He needed a wife. His career was booming, and he wanted a respectable partner by his side. And who better than a woman with a child, vulnerable and in need? Marrying her made him look like a noble man, while at the same time giving him the power to remind her constantly that he was feeding both of them. Well, if you don't understand, Diana finally snapped. I don't know how else to explain. Just accept that I need to be there. Fine, Valentin muttered.
Go.
But come back quickly. I'm not spending too long here with this. His name is Petya, Diana said sharply. And stop talking about my son like he's some object. Oh, your son, huh? Don't make it sound like he's mine, Valentin mocked. There was no point in arguing anymore. At least he had agreed to watch over little Petya. She really didn't want to drag the boy to a funeral, especially since he looked exactly like his biological father. Someone would definitely notice the resemblance, and that was the last thing she wanted. Half an hour later, Diana was standing outside the church. Seeing the lifeless body of her former love was much harder than she had imagined. The woman forced herself to walk up to the coffin and place a small bouquet of daisies on it. He had always loved those flowers. Diana barely managed to get through the church service. She hardly noticed what was happening around her, lost in her heavy thoughts. In her mind, she saw impossible daydreams. What life might have been like if she and Petya had stayed together, raising their son and simply loving each other. Of course, even back then, it had been unrealistic. Now, it was completely impossible. And that made it hurt even more. The only comfort she had was the certainty that once she left this funeral, she would return to her harsh reality, and these ghosts of what could have been would finally leave her alone forever. Her plan was simple. Once the service was over, she would quietly slip away without attracting attention. She had no desire to go to the memorial meal afterward. It would only be painful and pointless. She had already done what she came here for. Dinachka, where are you going? An older woman suddenly asked. We're not done yet. You have to come to the memorial meal. Diana froze. She recognized the tired, grief-stricken face. She had only seen this woman once or twice in person, and otherwise only in Petya's photos and stories. It was his mother. Alexandra Ivanovna. She looked much worse now, which was no surprise after losing her only son. But she was still recognizable. Diana hesitated. She didn't want to stay, but how could she say no to a grieving mother? With a heavy sigh, she gave in and followed everyone else to the restaurant. At times, it even felt like Alexandra Ivanovna was watching her closely, making sure she didn't slip away. Everything was exactly as Diana expected. The guests ate, drank, and shared memories of the deceased, sometimes crying, sometimes almost smiling when remembering something funny. Eventually, it was her turn to speak. Diana managed to say a few kind words about what a wonderful guy Petya had been, how loyal a friend, and so on. Then Alexandra Ivanovna stood up again. My friends, I'm very grateful to all of you for coming, for saying so many kind things about my son, and most of all, for being part of his life. But I must also tell you, though illness took Petya far too young and so suddenly, he still managed to leave a will. So I will now ask the notary to read its contents. Diana quietly began to rise from her seat. There was no reason for her to stay any longer. She didn't want to watch people fight over what little inheritance there was. But Alexandra Ivanovna noticed her attempt to leave and gave her a look that clearly meant, "You'd better stay." So Diana sat back down, though she was already irritated by the whole situation. She didn't really listen to the notary's monotone voice as he listed who was getting what. A stamp collection, a library, small things, nothing that could cause drama. But then his voice suddenly cut through her thoughts. Vasilieva Diana, the notary read aloud. Vasilieva Diana is to inherit a house in the village, on the condition that she fulfills one requirement. Me? The woman gasped in surprise. Yes, yes, the notary replied politely. That is, if you're Diana Vasilieva. No, this must be a mistake, she protested. What house? I haven't even seen him in 7 years. We didn't keep in touch at all. Well, it's the will of the deceased. Not my decision, the notary shrugged. My job is simply to read it out and make sure it's followed. According to this, you inherit a house in the village. And you mentioned some kind of condition? Diana asked more calmly. That's right. It says here, in order to receive the inheritance, you must live in that house for 1 month, together with your son. After that, the house will be fully yours. Oh, please, I've got better things to do, Diana snorted. I don't even want that house. You shouldn't reject it so quickly, Petya's mother said softly, her voice heavy with sadness. At least go see it first. You might change your mind. Fine, Diana answered coolly. I'll think about it. And with that, she was finally free to leave. When she came home from the funeral, she found her husband in an even worse mood than before she had left. She tried to ask him what was wrong, but he refused to explain, only grumbling that everything was fine and that she was imagining things. Yet the darker he looked, the more worried she became. What's wrong? Are you still upset that I went? She asked carefully. Oh, don't flatter yourself, Valentin scoffed. As if I'd be sulking over something like that. You think too highly of yourself if you believe it could ruin my mood. Then what is it? Diana pressed. Please tell me. Maybe I can help. You? Help, he gave a bitter laugh.
Sure.
Go to the store and buy me a rope. We still have soap, but check just in case. That's not funny, Diana snapped. I just came back from a funeral. Your jokes are completely out of place. Why are you so stubborn? Valentin glared at her. Fine, listen. If you really want to know, at work I was handling a huge deal. My project, my responsibility. And just now it completely fell apart. What should have brought a huge profit is now turning into massive losses.
Can you help with that?
That's awful, Diana said quietly. But will it really hurt your career that much? I mean, this is your first failure. Surely they'll see you've done more good than harm overall. You don't understand anything, her husband exploded. My career isn't just hurt, it's finished. The deal was mine alone, but I paid for it out of the company budget. And now that it's collapsed, I'm not just fired. I have to cover the loss. Diana's eyes widened. How much are we talking about? She asked nervously. Valentin shot her a cold, contemptuous look, then finally said the number. Diana gasped. It was enormous. She wouldn't make that kind of money in her pet store even in a year. And they still had to eat, raise their son, and now deal with an unemployed husband. The situation felt hopeless. For a few seconds, Diana just sat there in shock. But then, slowly, a thought came to her. A way out. A way to take this unbearable burden off their shoulders. A way for her husband to finally move forward. You know, Diana said slowly, if this debt can wait a month, I think I can help you. Valentin narrowed his eyes. And how exactly are you going to do that? Planning to rob a bank. Why a bank? Diana smirked. See, you didn't even want me to go to that funeral, but it turns out it was a good thing I did. Explain yourself, he demanded, his voice full of desperation. How on earth can your ex-fiancé's funeral help me? Like this, she replied. It turns out Petya didn't forget about me. He left me a house in the village. But there's a condition. We have to live there for 1 month with our son. After that, the house is mine. We could sell it. For a moment, Valentin just blinked at her, struggling to process what he'd heard. No wonder, it wasn't the kind of news you could digest instantly. Just when he thought all hope was lost, here was an unexpected way out. Well, I'll be damned, he finally breathed. His face lit up, and a smile crept across his lips. He got it now. And clearly, he didn't care one bit that the money would come thanks to Diana's ex. All right then, he said quickly. Pack your things. The sooner you go, the sooner it's done. Diana could almost see him ready to grab a suitcase and start stuffing clothes into it himself. She only hoped his reaction came from wanting to pay off his debts, not from secretly being glad to get rid of her and the child, even if only for a month. Wait, she interrupted. It's not that simple. I need to contact the notary, arrange things at work. You didn't agree right away? Valentin's eyes widened in disbelief. I had to think, Diana muttered. I wasn't even sure I wanted that house. Not wanted it, he repeated, stunned. We could have just sold it. Money is money. Unbelievable. Well, fine. Get it sorted. At least we've got time. The only bright side for Diana was that it was summer. That meant she wouldn't have to pull her son out of school. In the fall, he'd be starting first grade, and she knew how important it was not to fall behind right at the beginning. But getting a whole month off work was no small task, even though she had plenty of unused vacation days. The problem was her boss was too used to Diana always sacrificing her time off. And now she suddenly wanted to disappear for a month. A whole month, her manager gasped. And who's going to clean the cages and feed the animals?
Did you even think about that?
That's not only my job, Diana pointed out carefully. Everyone's supposed to take turns. You know perfectly well it doesn't work like that, the boss sighed. Tanya's terrified of parrots. Roma's allergic to hamsters. I think Roma's allergic to work in general, Diana muttered under her breath. Then, more seriously, she pleaded, Please, Masha, you have to understand. I really need this month. It's a matter of life and death. Oh, what am I going to do with you? The manager said with a long sigh. Fine, we'll try to manage. But please, come back as soon as you can. What else could Diana do but nod? She didn't want to reveal the real reason. The terms of the will sounded far too strange and unbelievable. So she simply blamed it on family matters. At last, after sorting everything out, Diana and her son headed to the village. She had no idea what was waiting for her there. Honestly, she was already worried it might not be easy. Still, she had agreed to this adventure. After all, her husband needed help. When they finally reached the address, Diana looked around. At first glance, things weren't as bad as she had imagined. The yard wasn't completely abandoned, and the house, though in need of a little cosmetic work, looked strong and solid. Actually, there were 2 houses on the property, plus a summer kitchen. All of them were about the same age and condition. On one hand, that was encouraging. It meant they might even sell it for more than she expected. On the other hand, she could already see how much work it was going to take. Are we really going to live here? Asked Kostya, clinging tightly to her hand. Yes, sweetheart, Diana answered gently. But only for a month. You'll see it'll fly by. Then we'll go back home. That's a shame, her son said suddenly. There are 2 houses here. Back home we just have rooms. Maybe we should stay here and Dad can come live with us? Oh, honey, that wouldn't work, Diana sighed. It's too far for your dad to get to work. And for me too, honestly. Let's not rush, okay? We might not even like it here. We will like it, Kostya said stubbornly. In that way only children can. Diana unlocked the smaller house first and stepped inside, then froze in shock. The place was a mess. Dust, dirt, cobwebs in every corner. Everything needed a deep clean before they could even think about living there. Without it, she and Kostya would choke in the filth. And then came the first big problem. There was no running water. Not in either house. Just an old bucket, proof of how people used to haul water. So, Diana had no choice but to go back and forth to the river several times. Without water, she couldn't clean, couldn't cook, nothing. Finally, after battling through the first round of chores and getting at least the first floor into shape, Diana moved on to cooking. But even that wasn't easy. There was no gas stove, only an old electric hot plate. She managed anyway and cooked a small pot of soup that, at least at first glance, looked pretty good. She called her son to eat, but he didn't answer. Worried, she went into the house. No sign of him. Before panicking, she decided to check outside. She headed straight for the bigger house, which until then she had only glanced at. What she saw inside was both touching and unsettling. The big house was just as neglected as the small one, dusty, dirty, forgotten. But that didn't bother Kostya one bit. He was sitting on the dusty floor, completely absorbed in playing with some little figures. When Diana looked closer, she realized they were wooden toys. Tiny cars, animals, and all sorts of little shapes. And they weren't just simple carvings. These toys moved. The cars rolled. The lions and dogs moved their legs and even opened their mouths. Most amazing of all, everything looked handmade. Diana shivered just thinking about how much such treasures could be worth if the right person sold them. But Kostya wasn't thinking about that at all. He had stumbled onto a hidden stash of wonderful toys and was so enchanted he forgot everything else, including his mother calling him to lunch. When Diana finally came closer, her son pointed excitedly at the little figures. Mom, look what I found. Yes, they're interesting. Diana smiled with relief. But first we need to wipe off all this dust. And not just from the toys. Besides, we haven't eaten all day. Let's have lunch first, and then you can continue exploring. Okay, Kostya replied, though without much enthusiasm. He cast one last, regretful glance at his new treasures and followed his mom to the table, where an even bigger surprise was waiting. Inside the summer kitchen, sitting right on the couch, was Alexandra Ivanovna. Oh, I'm so glad you finally decided to come, the woman exclaimed. Diana froze in shock. She didn't even know what to say. And while she was speechless, her would-be mother-in-law kept staring at little Kostya with unsettling intensity. That was uncomfortable enough, but things got worse when Alexandra murmured thoughtfully, "Your son looks just like Petya." Diana's heart skipped a beat. She knew that was true, but she had no intention of letting Kostya learn that the man he called Dad wasn't actually his father. For a moment, she tried to think of the right response, something that wouldn't be a total lie but also wouldn't cause pain. In the end, she simply changed the subject. Not to be rude, but what are you doing here? She asked. Well, you see, Alexandra sighed, I live here. This morning I went to the forest to pick berries and lost track of time. But don't worry, the houses are fully yours to use. I only keep this little summer kitchen, and even this will pass to you if you meet the conditions. And where will you live then? Diana asked, worried. Don't you worry. Alexandra smiled kindly. My son made sure I'm taken care of. It's a complicated arrangement, no point in explaining. But I won't be left without a home.
And you won't have to put up with me being around all the time.
Still, you've got a month here. Please don't be upset about it. This whole situation left Diana feeling awkward and uneasy. Please sit with us, she offered politely. We were just about to have lunch. Thank you, I'd love to, Alexandra said. And afterward, I'll bake some raspberry pies for you too. I picked so many berries. No way I could eat them all by myself. To Diana's surprise, sharing the property with her former almost mother-in-law turned out to be far less difficult than she'd feared. The older woman was discreet and never interfered, except for the way she sometimes watched Kostya too closely. But even that was understandable. After all, the boy really was the spitting image of her late son. Other than that, their coexistence became quite friendly. Alexandra took charge of cooking, preparing all sorts of dishes from forest berries, herbs, and vegetables from her own garden. Diana, in return, helped with the garden work. The older woman found watering, weeding, and other chores exhausting, but for Diana, young and strong, even if inexperienced, it was much easier to manage. Over time, Diana cleaned and fixed up both houses until they were neat and comfortable. She even suggested Alexandra move into one of them, but the woman refused. As long as the weather was warm, she preferred the little summer kitchen, and no amount of persuasion could change her mind. Meanwhile, Kostya couldn't have been happier. He spent his days outside, running to the forest, splashing at the river, and often going back to play with those same wooden figures he had discovered. One day, Diana asked Alexandra Ivanovna where those little carved figures had come from. She had always wondered how such treasures ended up in a simple village house. Petya made them, Alexandra answered softly, with tenderness in her voice. He was into carving ever since he was a boy. You didn't know? No, I had no idea. Diana shook her head. But now it makes sense why they look so unique. Alexandra smiled.
He really had talent.
And look now, those little trinkets turned out to be useful after all. Honestly, I once thought about throwing them away. What good were they? But Petya wouldn't let me. And after he died, I just couldn't bring myself to get rid of them. Which, I suppose, is a good thing now, isn't it? Another time, Alexandra returned from her usual trip to the forest, looking deeply troubled. She tried to hide it, but Diana had already learned how to read her expressions. After hesitating a little, she asked what had happened. Well, I ran into someone, Alexandra muttered darkly. But don't mind it, it's not your problem. Who did you meet? Did someone bother you? Should we go to the police? Diana pressed. Oh no. The last thing you need is to get mixed up in this. Alexandra shook her head. Petya stuck his nose where it didn't belong. And now you want to do the same? Don't. Wait, Diana said firmly. You told me he died of an illness. If that's not true, if I or my son could be in danger, I deserve to know. There won't be any danger if you stay out of it, Alexandra sighed. But fine, I'll tell you, or else your curiosity will drive you straight into trouble. There's a farmer around here, a very unpleasant man. Petya had a serious conflict with him. He found out this Vitaly was polluting our river, dumping his waste right into it. That's the same river the whole village uses for drinking water.
Petya tried to talk to him about it.
At first, just calmly. But when that didn't work, he threatened to go to the police, to report him to the authorities. He really was planning to file complaints. And then suddenly he got sick and died. Diana gasped. You think that farmer poisoned him? There's no proof, Alexandra shrugged. The medical exam didn't show anything unusual. But tell me, do you believe in such coincidences? Soon, Diana felt as though life had always been this way, living in the village with Kostya and Alexandra, and in some quiet sense, with Petya too, as though his shadow lingered. She even found herself forgetting she had a husband elsewhere, alive and well. It almost felt like this whole village life had begun only as a temporary escape, just to help her husband through a hard moment. The next morning brought a jolt back to reality. Diana woke later than usual, and the silence struck her immediately. No sound of Kostya's laughter, no groans of Alexandra working in the garden. At first, she didn't think much of it. She stretched, got up, and stepped outside. But after circling the yard, she realized something was wrong. The only living things around were a few hens pecking near her feet, and the goats watching her curiously from their pen. There was no sign of her son. No sign of Alexandra. They were gone. The animals, judging by how calm they were, had already been fed. That was strange. Lately, feeding them had been Diana's job. It wasn't hard for her. After working at a pet shop, she was used to it. And honestly, the goat turned out to be way friendlier than the hamsters that always tried to bite distracted workers. Even the chickens behaved better than the parrots she'd dealt with. Then, very slowly, a frightening thought entered her mind. What if Alexandra Ivanovna had truly convinced herself that Kostya was her real grandson? With how much he resembled his father, maybe she had lost touch with reality. Maybe she had decided to take her son and run away with him. She might have fed the animals on purpose so they wouldn't wake Diana up too early. And maybe she had suspected something long before Diana and her son ever arrived in this village. Which meant her strange behavior at the funeral suddenly took on a new, sinister meaning. Diana realized she couldn't handle this alone. She needed someone who knew the area, who could at least guess where an older woman might hide with a little boy. So, she rushed to the nearest police station. "Good morning," said the man at the reception. "I'm Leonid, the local officer. I don't think I've seen you around before. Who are you, and how can I help?" "My name is Diana," she stammered. I came here recently, just for a short stay." Tripping over her words, she explained everything. "Well, that's something," Leonid said, looking more surprised than worried. "Try not to panic. I don't believe Alexandra Ivanovna would hurt the boy. Honestly, I've known her a long time. She couldn't hurt a fly." "Yes, but," Diana faltered again. "Don't you see? I'm afraid she's lost her mind after everything she's been through." Leonid nodded thoughtfully. "Fair point. We can't rule that out. But I doubt they've gone far. Let's try to find them." They got into the police car and headed toward the forest. On the way, Leonid tried to calm her by telling funny little stories from his job, each one with a happy ending. It didn't really ease her anxiety, but she still felt grateful for his kindness. It didn't take long to find them. Alexandra Ivanovna and Kostya were calmly walking along the forest edge, not hiding at all, just looking for mushrooms. Every now and then they shouted to each other so they wouldn't get separated. That was how Diana and Leonid spotted them. Alexandra looked surprised when she saw the officer, then turned her gaze on Diana. In her eyes flickered first recognition, then disapproval. It was as if she were silently asking, "Really? Have you learned so little about me that you'd suspect I'd do something like this?" "I'm just glad you're safe," Diana whispered, hugging her son tightly. "Forgive me. I thought something terrible." "We only wanted to let you rest," the older woman explained gently. "It was Kostyk's idea. He said, 'Let's give Mom a break and go for a walk.' He even fed the animals himself, so they wouldn't bother you." "The goat too?" Diana asked in surprise, knowing her son was usually afraid of it. "The goat too," Alexandra nodded. "Well, everything seems fine here," Leonid said with a smile. "No crime, no complaints." "Correct." Both women nodded at the same time.
What was there to complain about now?
"Perfect then," the officer said cheerfully. "I can give you a ride back home if you'd like." "Oh no," Alexandra shook her head. "We still haven't picked enough mushrooms. And I think Diana might want to join us too." "Yes," she confirmed. "Leonid, thank you so much for your help and for everything." "That's my job," he smiled. "Anytime." He drove away humming a tune, leaving the three of them standing in the meadow. Diana felt burning shame. After all, they had lived under one roof for so long. Did this poor old mother, who had lost her son, really deserve to be judged so harshly? "I need to tell you something," Diana finally said. "Although you probably guessed it already, Kostya is your real grandson." "I didn't just guess," sighed Alexandra Ivanovna. "I knew for sure. Petya knew too. Once he accidentally saw you at the playground and understood everything right away. It's hard not to notice when you see your own son. The timing also matched. But he saw you had a new husband, so he decided not to bother you. Still, until the very end, he regretted that you two broke up." "Wait, so my dad isn't really my dad?" little Kostya asked with wide eyes. "No, son." Diana sadly shook her head. "I want to tell you, but I plan to do it later." "That's okay." The boy suddenly smiled. I always felt like Dad didn't love me. Now it makes sense. He went back to picking mushrooms, ignoring the adults' conversation. Alexandra watched him and sighed with a strange kind of sadness. It was Petya's idea for you to live in this house so that I could at least spend some time with my grandson before the end. Before the end? What do you mean? Diana asked, surprised. You see, the old woman sighed again. I'm sick. The doctors tried for a long time, but they couldn't put me into remission. At my last appointment, they told me I only have weeks left to live. Maybe months, if I'm lucky. Diana looked at her in shock. She had grown attached to this kind woman. Now she realized she would soon lose her, and there was nothing anyone could do. At least Alexandra would get the chance to spend time with her grandson. And now that strange will finally made sense. The next day, Diana prepared to go back to the city. Not for long, since her stay wasn't finished yet, but she needed to pick up some of Kostia's things she had forgotten. She should have done it earlier, but until now she had been afraid to leave her son alone with Alexandra. Taking him along didn't seem like a good idea either. But now she completely trusted her mother-in-law. Besides, Leonid promised to check in if needed. The night before, they had invited Leonid to dinner, and he gladly accepted. The young policeman clearly lacked good company in the village, so he was happy to meet Diana. As Diana walked up to her apartment the next day, she felt strange, almost like she was breaking into someone else's home. The place didn't feel welcoming, like she truly belonged in the village, not here. When she unlocked the door, that uneasy feeling grew stronger. Something wasn't right. She couldn't tell what at first. Only later, replaying the moment in her mind, did she realize there was a faint but obvious smell of another woman's perfume in the hallway. If she had noticed it right away, she might have just slammed the door and left, buying whatever items she needed instead. Then she wouldn't have had to see what she saw in the bedroom. You said she ran off to some village? Hissed an unfamiliar, completely naked woman, trying to cover herself with a blanket. She did, her husband stammered, still not fully realizing what was happening. Yeah, and now she's running for good, Diana said coldly. I'll just grab a few things, and I won't bother you anymore. What do you mean for good? Valentin asked, shocked. You can't. We still need to sell the house to pay off the debts. Oh, really? Interesting, Diana snapped. I promised that before I caught you with another woman. Do you think I still want to help you after this? No way. Divorce. Handle your debts yourself. The whole situation looked ridiculous. Diana quickly stuffed into her bag the things she had come for, plus whatever else was within reach. Her husband dragged himself behind her through the apartment, begging her not to do anything stupid. Meanwhile, his lover stood in the middle of the bedroom, completely shocked, clutching the slipping blanket around herself. That same evening, Diana announced to Alexandra Ivanovna, Leonid, and Kostya, "We're staying here for good." Kostya immediately started jumping around the room with joy. He loved living in the village, and until now he had been sad thinking about the day they'd have to leave. But suddenly, he realized they weren't leaving at all, and he didn't care one bit why his mom had changed her mind. The adults, on the other hand, were very curious. I'll explain later, Diana muttered, glancing at her son. They didn't ask again until Kostya went to bed. Then Diana told them everything. To her own surprise, she didn't feel pain or sadness when she described the scene. In fact, it almost amused her as she painted the farce in vivid detail. Well, that's for the best, Alexandra Ivanovna said with a laugh. Not so much because I wanted you to stay here, but because now you've seen your husband's true face, and you won't waste your life on him anymore. Yes, Diana sighed. The truth is, I saw it before too. I just lied to myself. I don't even know why. Before long, she found a part-time job at the local post office. It didn't pay much, but since most of their food came from their own farm, it was enough. And now Diana had plenty of free time she happily spent with her son, with Alexandra Ivanovna, and in long, pleasant talks with Leonid. She also loved walking into the forest to pick berries and mushrooms. Diana enjoyed her new life. So did Kostya. He was thrilled. One day, while Alexandra Ivanovna and Kostya were off in the woods gathering berries, there was an unexpected knock at the door. Diana opened it, assuming it was Leonid dropping by. But she froze. On the doorstep stood a tall, broad-shouldered man, nearly 2 meters high, with a clean-shaven head and an intimidating look. Diana was so startled she forgot to even say hello. She just stared at him like a statue until he spoke first. "Hello," he said with thinly veiled contempt. "Am I right in thinking you're Diana?" "Suppose so," she answered carefully. "And you are?" "Vitaly," he replied with a smirk. "I'm sure you've heard of me." And she had. Now it all made sense. He was the farmer Petya had clashed with, the one people whispered had likely caused his death. No wonder her stomach tightened. "I imagine you've also heard things about me that don't inspire much trust," he continued. "But don't exaggerate. I wanted to talk to you, because I thought you'd be a reasonable city person, not like these village idiots. Honestly, will you care how I run my business? I heard you weren't staying long, anyway." "Your information is outdated," Diana shot back firmly. "I like it here. I'm staying. And by the way, the people you call village idiots have been far more pleasant to me than you are right now." "Well, since you've decided to stay," Vitaly drawled, his voice carrying a threat, "then it's even more important not to get on my bad side." "And why should you? I could offer you a good job. Maybe you'd even earn more than in the city. I could also help with repairs. You've got a big property here, but I see you're missing strong men's hands. And what exactly would I owe you for such generosity?" Diana asked sharply. "Oh, just a little thing." Vitaly gave a forced laugh. "See, your late fiancé, or whatever he was to you, had a certain folder. And inside that folder were, let's call them materials that really shouldn't fall into the wrong hands. If you give me that folder, then you and I will be best friends." "Listen," Diana said firmly, "even if I knew where that folder was, I'd never give it to you. And I don't need your friendship. I've managed just fine without it." "I think you'll regret that," the farmer said coldly. There was nothing more to say. He spun around and stomped off toward the gate, deliberately trampling over the vegetable beds as he went. Diana could only be grateful that neither the goat, the chickens, nor, God forbid, her son had crossed his path. Later, when the family came back from a trip to the forest, they found both houses and the little summer kitchen turned completely upside down. Someone had clearly searched the place while they were gone. And it wasn't hard to guess who had done it, or what he was looking for. They called Leonid. He carefully examined the scene, then came out to the anxious family. His face was troubled. He clearly didn't like what he had to say. "No traces," he finally reported. "They worked clean with gloves. Not a single clue pointing to the culprit." "But we know who it was," Diana exclaimed. "He threatened me directly. Doesn't that count for anything?" "Believe me," Leonid said sadly, "it counts a lot for me, but not for a court. Right now it's just your word against his. And even if you could prove he threatened you, that doesn't automatically prove he carried it out. That needs separate evidence." "So what now?" Dasha asked desperately. "Is there really nothing we can do?" "There is one option," Leonid said seriously. "The fact that he searched everything and still didn't find what he wanted means that folder is probably still here. And I believe it holds enough material to accuse him of crimes far more serious than vandalism." That thought made sense, but where could the folder be? If it had been hidden inside the house, there was no way Vitaly or his men would have missed it. They had torn through everything, checked every corner. "Then we should be looking outside," Leonid reasoned. "Think about it. Pyotr knew someone would come after him. He would have hidden those papers somewhere Vitaly would never think to search. And how are we supposed to figure that out?" Diana asked gloomily. "Try to remember," Leonid said. "Where did he like to spend time? Maybe there was some special place." "There was," Alexandra Ivanovna suddenly gasped. "The lookout spot by the old oak tree. You know, he used to hang around there all the time, sometimes the whole day." "And not just the river," Leonid said thoughtfully. "From there you can clearly see the whole farm. It could have been used as a lookout point." Without wasting time, they headed to the old oak, Leonid leading the way, followed by Diana and Caustic, who tagged along despite their attempts to send him home. While the adults searched around the tree, scratching their heads, Caustic's eyes went upward. Before Diana could react, the boy had already climbed up the huge oak. She told him to get down right away, but kids don't always listen. Instead, he found a hollow in the trunk, crawled inside, and came out cheering, almost slipping on the branches. In his hand, he held an old, dirty folder. "Looks like this is it," Leonid said with satisfaction. They sent Caustic home to tell his grandmother about the discovery, while the adults decided there was no time to lose. The folder had to go straight to the district prosecutor's office. They went to Leonid's house, got into his car, but after a few minutes, he grimly announced, "It won't start." The car really wouldn't move, breaking down at the worst possible time. Leonid tried everything, even ran to the garage for spare parts, clutching the precious folder. He returned, handed the folder to Diana, and rushed off again to fix it. But nothing worked. Luckily, one of the villagers saw their struggle and offered to drive them. They happily agreed. But soon Leonid realized something was wrong. They weren't going toward the town. By the time he noticed, it was too late. Instead, they were driven into a forest near the edge of the village, where Vitaly was already waiting. The farmer stood there with a shotgun, a wicked grin on his face. "Don't do anything stupid," he ordered. "What did you think, that I'm an idiot? I was the one who trashed your house, just to make you lead me to the real hiding spot. I broke your car too. And that helpful villager? I paid him to bring you here. So there's only one thing left. Hand over the folder." Diana hugged the documents to her chest, but deep down she knew it was useless. Leonid gently took the folder from her, waved it in front of Vitaly's face, and suddenly threw it far into the swamp. "Well, then no one gets it, right?" Vitaly smirked. "Fine by me. That works too. You can all go now." Diana was crushed with disappointment. No matter how much Alexandra Ivanovna tried, she couldn't convince her it wasn't her fault. Vitaly had simply been one step ahead. That's the way cunning men are. "But this isn't the end," the old woman said, though she didn't fully believe it herself. "He didn't get the folder either. We'll find another way to bring him down." Diana shook her head. "No, and we don't need to. He's always ahead of us, always planning. I'm sorry, but I don't want what happened to your son to happen to mine." "Yes, you're right," the mother-in-law agreed sadly. "I somehow forgot about that. And Leonid has disappeared somewhere," Diana added with concern. "I went to see him this morning, wanted to comfort him after yesterday, but he wasn't home, not at the station either, and his car was still there. Oh, I hope nothing bad happened to him." Just then, there was a knock at the door. Both women jumped and looked nervously in that direction. Neither of them said it out loud, but they were both thinking the same thing. There was nothing to do but open the door. Who knew what might happen if they didn't? But it wasn't Vitaly, whose appearance they had feared. It was Leonid, looking almost inappropriately cheerful, given the circumstances. He walked into the house, whistling some tune, sat down on the couch, and asked for something cold to drink. "Oh, those commuter trains during rush hour," he complained. "Pure hell. I wouldn't recommend it." "What were you even doing on a train?" Diana asked, surprised. And why was he so cheerful? Had he forgotten what had happened? Forget? Impossible. Leonid smiled. "No, I saw it through to the end. The folder with the documents is now in the hands of the district prosecutor's office. Believe me, Pyotr did a brilliant job. He dug up enough evidence to put that bastard behind bars for a long time." "But how?" Diana stammered. "You threw the folder into the swamp. Did you actually get it back?" "Of course not. Do you think I'd crawl through a swamp?" He chuckled. "No, it was much simpler. The folder we had yesterday wasn't the real one. Well, technically it was, but stuffed with old newspapers and scrap paper. The real documents were at my house the whole time." "What?" was all Diana could say. "Very simple," Leonid grinned. "The moment the car mysteriously refused to start, I suspected something. When I ran to the garage, I accidentally took the real folder with me. Why didn't I tell you? Just in case. What if someone was listening? Better to let him think he won. In the end, I outsmarted him. He thinks he's the clever one, but not this time. Life slowly returned to normal. Diana finally filed for divorce and began planning her wedding. Leonid proposed, and she said yes. After everything they had been through, it felt like they had known each other forever. And little Kostik grew very attached to the kind-hearted police officer. Valentin, however, was furious, not just about the divorce, but also because Diana refused to sell the house. He wasn't going to give up easily. He knew he couldn't scare her with property division, so he chose another form of pressure. You know what, he sneered. I'll fight for custody of the child. And I'm pretty sure the court will side with me. From every angle, I look better on paper. So, you still have a choice. Sell the house and give me the money you promised, or I'll take the boy. But he's not your child, Diana reminded him. And that became the key argument in court. After some hesitation, the judge ruled in Diana's favor. Kostya wasn't Valentin's biological son, and more importantly, he didn't want to live with him. Still, Valentin wasn't ready to back down. He vowed to appeal the decision. But then, right there in the courtroom, Alexandra Ivanovna approached him. What exactly are you hoping to achieve? She asked coldly. Selling the house? Forget it. Ever since it was built, our region has been declared a protected area. My son signed an agreement with the state. He can live here, own the land and the house, but he can't sell it, can't build anything new, can't use it for business. So your little scheme is finished. That was the final blow. Valentin realized that no matter what he tried, no matter how he threatened, he would never see the money. What became of him after that, how he dealt with his debts, Diana never knew. And honestly, she didn't care. She married Leonid, who turned out to be a wonderful husband and a loving father to Kostik. And then something unexpected happened. Alexandra Ivanovna went into remission. She now had several more precious years to spend with the people she loved most.